All right, I want to thank you for coming out today and being witness to this presentation, overseen, of course, by His Majesty King Saul. As you know, King Saul has asked us to put together these series of presentations on the history of Israel. And so today, I have the honor of continuing this series through Israel's Judges period by talking about the period after Gideon, where we meet a man named Jephthah. So just to bring you all up to speed, I want to have a few ground rules. Of course, His Majesty King Saul may ask any questions that he likes. The rest of you, please be silent for the court. And we'll begin. All right, so the background of this period, we seem to have a pattern emerging where Israel goes through this cycle. They start off by having peace, and then they get complacent. It seems that our God is too much work for them, and so they go and worship the gods of the surrounding people. Of course, God is a jealous God, and He will not stand for this. And so He allows suffering to befall the Israelites, and obviously they don't like this. So they turn to prayer and return to God, who they have turned His back on, and He relents in His anger and sends a judge to deliver them. And then they go in to have peace, and the cycle renews again. We have seen this with Gideon. We have seen this with Ehud. We have seen this with Othniel. It's happened over and over again. So now that we have that, let's start with where we pick up. The sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. They served Baals and the Asheroth, the gods of Amram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the sons of Ammon, that'll be important later, and the gods of the Philistines. Thus they forsook the Lord, and they did not serve Him. Thus the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and He sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the sons of Ammon. Told you it would be important later. They afflicted and crushed the sons of Israel that year. For 18 years they afflicted the sons of Israel who were beyond the Jordan in Gilead in the land of the Amorites. Here is the first instance in which we have been able to find out the specific gods that Israel turned to. In past, we've always seen Israel turning to other gods. It's always been Baals in a general sense. But here we have seen for the first time the specific gods. And it is not simply that these idols are seen, well, Adonai remains unseen to all but a few. No, it is that these idols represent creation itself. And how tempting is it to worship tangible creation rather than the intangible Creator when things are easy and the need for our God does not seem so urgent. So then the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, "We have sinned against you, for indeed we have forsaken our God and have served the Baals." The Lord said to the sons of Israel, "Did I not deliver you from the Egyptians, from the Amorites, the sons of Ammon, and from the Philistines? Also when the Sidonites and the Amalekites and the Mannonites oppressed you. You cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hands. But you have forsaken me and served other gods, so I will no longer deliver you. Go and cry out to the gods that you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble." But the sons of Israel said to the Lord, "We have sinned. Do to us whatever seems good to you, only please deliver us today." So they put away the foreign gods from among them, and they served the Lord. And he could bear the misery of Israel no longer. Then the sons of Ammon were summoned, and they camped in Gilead, and the sons of Israel gathered together and camped in Mizpah. The people, the leaders of Gilead, said to one another, "Who is the man who will begin the fight against the sons of Ammon? He shall become the head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." So can we really blame God for being this frustrated with Israel? I don't think so. From the Exodus with Moses to this moment, he has saved them time and time again, only to be rejected. Staying faithful is way too hard and way too much work. If I may be so bold, Your Majesty, I know I have felt similar feelings when I have been spurned by my own past lovers for much the same reason. Let's also note Israel's response. To really understand what makes this response so different from their past responses, let's again compare with one of our recent presentations, Gideon. With Gideon, an angel came from God to call and raise up Gideon. He was in the winepress, and the angel came out. Gideon doubted at first, but the angel proved to be from God. And there was a clear distinction that this was a call from God. Israel's response was to seek the will of God, at least in the beginning. But here, Israel's response to God's refusal by getting rid of their idols, which is something that has worked for them in the past, let's be fair. And now instead of seeking God again to see who he might raise up, they instead turn to each other to find their own judge. So let's meet that judge. Here enters our main character. Now Jephthah was a valiant warrior, but he was the son of a harlot. And Gilead was the father of Jephthah. You know, Jephthah's kind of a tricky name. Let's call him Jeff from now on. Gilead's wife bore him sons, and when his sons grew up, they drove Jeff out and said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." So Jeff fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob, and worthless fellows gathered themselves around Jeff, and they went out with him. Now, worthless fellows, basically they were bandits. You know, like Robin Hood, Band of Merry Men, bandits, that kind of thing. It came about after a while that the sons of Ammon fought against Israel. When the sons of Ammon fought, the elders of Gilead went to get Jeff from the land of Tob. And they said to him, "Come and be our chief, that we may fight against the sons of Ammon." But then Jeff said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So then why have you come to me now when you are in trouble?" The elders said, "For this reason we have now returned to you, that you may go with us and fight the sons of Ammon and become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." So Jeff said to the elders of Gilead, "If you take me back to fight against the sons of Ammon, and the Lord gives them up to me, will I become your head?" The elders of Gilead said to Jeff, "The Lord is witness between us. Surely we will do as you have said." Then Jeff went with the elders, and the people made him head and chief over them. And Jeff spoke all these words before the Lord at Mizpah. So there we go. There's our hero. It seems that while being an outlaw, Jeff not only built for himself a reputation for being a great warrior, but also a man of honor. When the elders approach him, he shows some rather justified hesitation, given their past treatment of him. But ultimately he accepts. And, being this man of honor, there is no record of him enacting any retribution for the wrongs done to him. Isn't it interesting that Israel's choice of an outcast that they now return to in their time of need is similar to what we just saw them do with God? So now Israel has its mighty warrior to face, the army of King Ammon. And what is our great and powerful warrior's first response? Is it maybe a strong front line? Is it maybe a sneak attack? It's diplomacy. Instead of attacking, Jeff talks to King Ammon. Not what you were expecting. Seeking to solve the conflict with words. And lo and behold, it works. King Ammon is so impressed by Jephthah's diplomacy that he agrees to peace, and for the rest of Jephthah's life, Israel has peace and prosperity. What's that? Yeah, I know you have more notes on your sheet, but he what? What do you mean you don't buy it? I mean, really? You sure you don't want this ending? This is a great ending. All right, fine, but you asked for this. He did try diplomacy, and we do have a copy of that letter, and it is a masterful use of the records of the Torah. I'm confident that nobody expected that level of knowledge to come from Jeff. If you would all like to look at the details of the letter, I had Ruth make copies and include them in the memo you all got last week. But unfortunately, this does lead to the next point. Just like some people in our court, not mentioning any names, King Ammon completely disregards the message. And I mean seriously, they aren't long just for the sake of being long. There's important information in there, and it takes a good number of words in order to get that information. You know what? My apologies, Your Majesty. I'll continue with the assigned presentation. With war inevitable, Jeff marches forward to the battle lines, gathering the army of Israel. But like many judges before him, he doubts the outcome of his first battle. Now, despite Israel raising up its own judge, all accounts seem to point to the fact that God was indeed with him. God had relented in his anger and had sent his spirit upon Jeff. But this doesn't mean that it overwrote his free will. And we see that because Jeff actually copies Israel in trying to manipulate God into securing victory with a vow. Now, there is some conflict with the reports on the wording of Jeff's vow, which will make sense in a moment. He says, "If you give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in victory will be the Lord's, or I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering." What's that? Yeah, I agree. It is a terribly worded vow. If it's the and, then what if the thing that comes out of his house isn't suitable for sacrifice? If it's the or, then what in the heck does he mean it's going to be the Lord's? But you know what? It's about to get worse. Jeff won the war so much that it was referred to as a great slaughter, and the sons of Ammon were subdued before Israel. But when Jeff came home, it was his one and only daughter that came out to meet him. When he saw her, he says, "Alas, my daughter, you have ruined me, for I have given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." So she says to him, "My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, since the Lord has avenged you of your enemies. But let this thing be done for me. Let me be alone for 2 months, that I may go into the mountains, me and my companions, and bewail my virginity." So he sent her away. And at the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow that he had made. Did Jephthah think that his daughter might want to celebrate his victory? This seems to be a strange shift from the very intentional man we saw before. And yet here again, we see his honor forcing him to keep this terrible vow. His knowledge of the Torah should have told him that God hates human sacrifice, or that God had given him a way out of a bad vow. But this is not what we see. Whether Jeff's daughter was a human sacrifice or not, his vow had ended his family line and broken his heart. Oh, yes? Yeah, that's a good question. Assuming that Jeff did sacrifice his daughter, it does make us think of Abraham and Isaac and the way God intervened there. And there is no mention of God intervening here. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I'll indulge you, Your Majesty, because otherwise, I mean, come on. So it's important to note the differences between those two things. With Abraham and Isaac, God actually called for the sacrifice of Isaac as a test. That was initiated by God, and God had a plan for that outcome. It was all about testing Abraham. That was God initiated. This was not God initiated. This was all Jeff's doing. And so why didn't he save her at the end if she was a burnt offering? Well, I guess sometimes God just lets us face the consequences of our bad decisions. Does that help? Can we get back to the story? Thanks. So then the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they said to Jeff, "Why did you fight against the sons of Ammon without calling us to go with you? We will burn your house down around you." And Jeff replied, I did call you, and you did not deliver me. When I saw that you would not come, I took my life into my own hands, and I went against them, and the Lord gave them into my hand. So why then have you come to me this day to fight me? Then Jeff gathered all the men of Gilead and fought against Ephraim and defeated them. And he captured the fords of the Jordan River opposite of Ephraim. And it happened that when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead would say to him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, they would say to him, "Now say Shibboleth." But he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it correctly. And they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus it came to pass that 42,000 of Ephraim fell. Jeff judged Israel for 6 years before he died, and then he was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. This is the other faction of Israelites, and they come to Jeff in anger. Maybe it's because they wanted a piece of the glory. But whatever the reason, Jeff does not stand for it. The odd thing here is that the test he puts in place is now the opposite of what we saw from him in the beginning. Where in the beginning he didn't carry out any retributions, now he does in a very, very big way. Those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So we have to ask ourselves, what are the lessons from this strange story from our past? What does it matter? That is, after all, why you assigned us these, right? Well, I think I've come up with some answers. It seems one of our great temptations is to use what has worked in our past to attempt to manipulate God into doing what we want him to do. To use the Torah he has blessed us with as a tool to bend the Almighty to our will, as if that was even possible. When we see the example of this happening with the Israelites, we can see the potential for real harm to come about. Israel's criteria for their judge may have been different than God's criteria, and by choosing their own will over God's will, they opened themselves up to the consequences of that choice. From Jeff, we learn that it is not enough to know about God. From his letter to King Ammon, we learn that Jeff had great knowledge of the Torah. But from his vow to his civil slaughter, it seems that he lacked knowledge of God. Or else maybe he would not have acted in ways that were so against the Almighty. Or at the very least, he would have made a better vow. Our sins can and do frustrate God. But how blessed are we that we serve a God whose love and mercy are greater. This doesn't mean we are free to sin because God will get over it. But rather we can take comfort that when we repent and turn back to God, his love and mercy will overflow to us. From Jeff again, we can take comfort in knowing that there is nothing in our past that can disqualify us from being of service to God. If anyone had an excuse not to be of service, the illegitimate outlaw that Israel had previously turned their back on, well, he surely had it. And yet, Jeff is used to deliver Israel from their oppressors. So if Jeff can be used despite his background, any of us can likewise be used. Let us seek the will of God so that it can go better for us than it did for Jeff. The final lesson that Jeff teaches us is the danger of seeing the world in only black and white. His honor forced him to hold this view. And this view is what made his vow so fatally binding. His daughter also must have held this view, since she accepts her fate without any argument or hesitation. When faced with conflict, Jeff does not negotiate. He simply states the facts and says, "You are either for me or against me." There is no wiggle room. Is it possible that this is not always the right approach? When we try to fit everything in our lives into those two boxes, we can fail to recognize or understand things that do not fit neatly into those two boxes. We can make bad decisions that might not be as tempting if we allow ourselves to see in color. This is what is so important to seek after the heart of God. Rather than to just know some things about God, the closer we are to our God, the better we are able to see the world in color as we try to be better representatives of him on earth. Let us take that as some encouragement. We can see in color as we chase after the heart of God.